Hello YouTube, and welcome to this short video on the god Arche, another addition to the Divine series. I can now proudly say that we have finally covered over half of the Divines. And yeah, that makes me happy to know, because I'm over halfway of completing a series, and that doesn't really happen a lot on this channel. That said, this isn't gonna be a long video, so let's not make the intro any more longer than it has to be either. Arche says, honor the earth, its creatures and the spirits, living and the dead. Guard and tend the bounties of the mortal world and do not profane the spirits of the dead. Come to me, Arche, for without you there is neither breath nor beginning, nor any man can live, love or learn without the spark of your spirit. Arche is the god of funerals and burials, but most tend to see him more as the god of life and death, and he is often associated with mortality itself. Arche's teachings all have to do with the honoring of the dead, and to an extent to celebrate life and use life to its fullest. His priests often preside over funerals and take care of the dead with respect. Priests of Arche can often be found tending to halls of the dead or presiding over graveyards, where they make sure that the dead can have their peaceful rest in the way that Arche wishes them to have. One of the gravest insults to Arche's commandment to treat the dead with respect is necromancy. His priests are staunch opponents of necromancy, as necromancy, according to Arche's teachings, is extremely unrespectful to the dead, and his priests will be very offended by it, as it's seen as a vile manipulation of the natural. In terms of origin story, Arche's story is a bit different from that of the other divines, or rather, there are multiple stories telling of his origin. First, there's the story that he was basically among the original spirits who constructed Mundus and decided to stay and finish the creation after the intentions of Lorcan had become clear. This version of the story is largely the same as that of most of the other divines, however there is an alternate story to his origin, one that is most prominently followed by his own priests and is accepted by his own priests and is taught by his own priests. The priests claim that Arche was not among the original spirits who constructed Mundus, rather he was once a mortal man who ascended to godhood, held by Mara. According to this legend, he was once an ordinary shopkeeper who was very intrigued by knowledge and tried to learn as much as he could by reading and collecting books. One day, according to this legend, he found a mythical book which contained the secrets of life and death. He became so fixated on this book that he let all other aspects of his life slide so he could better understand life and death. He began to understand life and death better than any had before him. But before he could complete his study into life and death, he fell to illness. He was almost dying, and on his dying bed he begged the goddess Mara in a prayer to allow him some more time to complete his studies on life and death and understand its meaning finally. He begged her to give him more time to find the true meaning, after which Mara actually gave him the choice to either die or to join the divines in their pantheon and preside for eternity over the cycle of life and death. He chose to join the divines and would from that moment on preside over the cycle of life, death and birth. And he would make sure that this cycle would remain in balance forever, and through his teachings teach humanity the meaning of life and death, which according to him is that there are far more souls in the universe than there is room for them in the physical world. But it's in the physical world that a soul has the opportunity to learn and progress. Without birth, souls would not be able to acquire that experience, and without death there would be no room for birth. This is according to Arche the meaning of life in a sense, and well, if you think about it, it just tells you to use your life in the best way possible. Which of the versions of his origin is true, I don't really dare to say. There's even another vision on his origin which basically tells that he is a combination of two gods, however I have not been able to find any substantial evidence inside the game for that theory. However, especially the legend that the priests of Arche believe, with Arche once being a mortal man, I find very interesting. That said, we have reached the end of this very short summary on Arche. I hope you enjoyed it and consider sticking around for the next lore video, or watching more of my other videos that I already have on my channel. I almost have 150 lore videos now, so there's enough to watch. And allow me to thank the amazing people on screen who make these kind of videos possible, my patrons, and especially my top patrons Bernardo Binda, Hayden Barnes, Gabriel Binda and Sam Kempling. These guys are the absolute best. With that said, I will see you all in the next video, which is going to be a lot longer than this one, but needed a lot more work, so I decided to do this one this week. Bye bye. Hello YouTube, and welcome to a video on the Argonian language, the language Gel. I've been wanting to cover this topic for a while, as it's requested a lot by some diehard Argonian supporters, so I thought I'd give it a try. That said, let's get on with the video. So, in case you hadn't figured it out yet, all races of Tamriel in lore have their own language, even though they speak English in the games. Lore is always a bit different from the games. Even human language is said to be very different from, for example, the Elven language, but if you followed my lore lecture series on the early Elder Scrolls history, you will know by now that all languages on Tamriel have a similar origin, their origin being the Old Elnofex language. The language of the Elnofey, as the Elnofey are the precursors of all intelligent races on Tamriel, and thus all languages in Tamriel are essentially branches of the Old Elnofey language. They essentially all use a similar structure and a similar writing pattern to that old language. If you want to know more about that, I recommend watching my lore lecture series, specifically the one on the first half of the Meretic era, as I go more deeply into the writing and language aspect of things there. But the point I'm trying to make here is, all languages on Tamriel have a similar origin, except for the language of the Argonians, the language Gel. Gel as a language is very different from any other language on Tamriel, and it might actually be the oldest language of them all. For as far as we know, it never truly evolved or devolved into sub-languages throughout history, since that would change the language to a dramatic degree. We'll get to that later. Another big reason why it never devolved or evolved is most likely because all Argonians inside Blackmarsh are more or less connected with each other by having all their connections to their creators, the histories, and then through the histories being connected to each other. It's believed that the histories learned the Argonian language to them, and staying in contact with the trees might have been the reason that it hasn't really evolved, as in our own world, language evolves when groups of speakers have been separated for a long time, but in this case the entire group remains somewhat connected to each other through their creators, meaning that any evolving or devolving from that reason would be very slow. And in a way, it wouldn't really make sense for this language to evolve, as we hear in lore that Gel is as close of a speech to actual thought as can be. According to Argonians, their language is able to convey thoughts into speech in a way that no other language is capable of doing. To be able to do so, one must be fully fluent in the language and have a very precise pronunciation. And in addition to that, must also have very precise body language, as body language like whipping your tail as an Argonian or squinting your eyes is a very important part of the language to convey your message fully. To be able to use this language to its fullest extent, the Argonians learn it directly from the Hist in their youth, among other things, by hatching their eggs close to the trees and drinking their sap in their youth. We have some examples of Argonians growing up outside of Blackmarsh with limited connection to the Hist, and this actually completely damages their ability to learn the language, because they have a very bad time to learn the language. They will never quite get on the level of their Blackmarsh native brethren, meaning that to function in Argonian society, it's best for an Argonian to spend his youth in Blackmarsh, as otherwise your connection to your race, because the connection to your language, will be very severely severed, as they will never truly be able to nail the very precise body language and very precise pronunciation. It is also hard for other races to learn the Argonian language, as it's innately different to any other language on Tamriel. As said before, most Tamrielic languages follow a similar structure, as they all come from Old Elnofex, the language of the Old Elnofey, and thus, for example, grammar rules will usually be familiar to an extent to, for example, a human trying to learn the High Elven language. Its structure and concepts will be largely similar, but Gel is very different. It relies on very precise pronunciation. If you have an accent, it could change a part of your message. The fact that an accent or any different pronunciations can completely change your message may also be one of the reasons why the language never really evolves, or very slowly evolves. And one of the biggest barriers to foreigners learning the language, or Argonians learning one of the other languages of Tamriel, is the fact that the way that the language handles time are very different. Tamrielic languages are largely structured in a way like ours. They are time dependent, with past and future tenses. So for example, I can say, I will finish this video in a short while, or after a short while I will have finished this video, or before making this video I was playing Luigi's Mansion. All those statements have a concept of time in them. Gel doesn't have those concepts of time. There is no concept of time and no way for me to explain this very clearly how it would work, as this is one of the limitations of the English language. You cannot say something without a point of time being used as a reference or being involved, be it past, present or future. But in the Argonian language, all those, past, present and future, are all at the same time true, and neither of them are true at the same time. There isn't even a word for time in Gel. Everything is just one state of being, and they take a holistic approach to events. Argonians find it very strange why we would want to establish a linear sequence of events. They find it strange we think in a linear way, in a linear sequence of events, and they think that it would be way more convenient like they do it, as a holistic apprehension, meaning that they take all events as equal, not having the concept of time. If you think this is weird, it is, both to you and me. English and my own native language, Dutch, are all time-dependent languages. However, some languages do have some form of time independence in them. For example, the Chinese language. In that language it's possible to say an action without a sense of time. Unfortunately, that isn't possible for me and most of my viewers, but it's possible for some languages and for the Argonians. Maybe if there's some Chinese viewer here, maybe he can explain it better in the comments. If you're there, explain it, please. However, learning the concept of time dependence in other languages and the time independence of Gel is by far the biggest struggle for anyone trying to learn Gel or trying to learn another language if their native language is Gel. As far as we know, there's no fluent Gel speaker among non-Argonians. A lot of other races can learn it, they can speak it, and they can understand it, for example as diplomats or whatever function they may have in Blackmarsh. We know of some humans that have learned it to a good extent, but they will never truly be fluent. They will never learn the subtleties in pronunciation that can change up everything, or the body language aspect of it in such a perfect way that they can convey their feelings in a right way. In terms of Argonians, well, as we've seen in the games, Argonians can pretty much learn our language. It's very hard for them to learn it at first, but due to the language being more simple, in the sense that it doesn't require any body languages or requires very precise pronunciation. For example, if you have an accent like an Argonian accent, that's fine, people will still understand you. There are many Argonians that are fluid in other languages, of course. That said, the language itself can sound very weird to outsiders. It's said that it can sound like grunts and squeaks to most non-speakers when Argonians speak it very fast. For example, presumably after hearing some Argonians speak their language very quickly, the Mad Emperor Pelagius Septim III waned himself in the illusion that he could actually speak with them in that language. And when an Argonian ambassador came to the palace, he just made random squeaks and noises to an Argonian ambassador. I found that pretty funny. Now, in terms of pronunciation, I'm not even really gonna try to pronounce it correctly, as I have trouble with English as it is, as most of you know. But a lot of the letters and combinations are pronounced very differently in the Gel language. For example, the H is almost always silent. Think about the word sex, helil, which is usually pronounced as says-lil. So the H is completely silent, and the X's get pronounced as Z's. As a final note, Argonian names are often a word or multiple words in Gel, and are sometimes directly translated when an Argonian lives in a different society. Think for example about names like Stands in Shadows, which are the kind of names that you usually hear associated with Argonians. These are names that are translated from their Gel names, and they get these names apparently at birth, when they get in contact with history. It's not known if the parents or the elders give the names to the little Argonians, or if the Hist directly sort of conveys the name upon the little Argonian, but we know it happens at birth. And these names usually describe the Argonian as a person. and can of course be translated to other languages, like I've mentioned before. In all respects, Gel is a very different and difficult language to learn, but it's also very interesting and surprisingly fleshed out in the lore. There's even an English to Gel translator on the internet that also translates Gel to English. However, I do not know if that's purely fan-made and uses made-up words as well, or if it's only using the in-lore words, but if you're really interested in the Argonian language, I really recommend checking it out. It's pretty interesting. That said, thank you so much for watching another lore video. Before I end this, allow me to thank my top patrons Bernardo Binda, Hayden Barnes, Gabriel Binda and Sam Campling, and of course all the others on screen. These people are the absolute best and they make these kind of videos possible. That said, if you like this video, consider sticking around for more lore content or watch some of my other lore videos that is currently in the backlog. I believe that I'm almost at 200 lore videos at this point, so there's a lot to watch. And with that said, I think I'll see you all in the next lore video. Bye bye.